Hey, thanks for watching. This is part 2 of our series called Judgmental Christians. Paul is writing to a church in the city called Corinth. The big idea for this week comes right out of verse 12, and let me read this for you again. It isn't my responsibility to judge outsiders, but it certainly is your responsibility to judge those inside the church who are sinning. Now, my guess is you don't like this idea when you first hear this. If you are a Christian, you don't want to be judged by other Christians. You don't like that feeling. But if you remember, when we started this series, I said that by the end of this, you would see that this is good news, not just for Christians, but also people who aren't Christians and are just interested in Christianity in general. So to understand how we should think about what that judging actually looks like, if Paul is saying Christians can judge each other and they should do that within a church, how do they actually do that in a way that's loving? And so we're going to go to a different part of the Bible. If you want to flip over to the book of Galatians, this is another letter written by the same guy, Paul, to a church in a place called Galatia. And throughout all of these videos, we're going to be using the NLT Bible translation. This is from Galatians chapter 6, verse 1. Let me read it for you. Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. And be careful to not fall into the same temptation yourself. Share each other's burdens, and in this way, obey the law of Christ. This gives us a picture into the type of scenario where we should be judging another person and how we should be doing it. This is when someone has clearly fallen into some sort of negative pattern that's harming their life or harming the lives of people around them. But the way that you approach the issue is extremely important. You have to do it both gently and humbly. All of us, we should recognize the fact that we're Christians means we couldn't have saved ourselves. It was only because Jesus came to save us that we're reconciled with God in the first place. We didn't earn it. We couldn't deserve it through any merit of our own. And so anytime that we approach anyone who is struggling with something and try to help them through it or even call them out on their behavior, it has to be coming from a place of humility that's rooted directly in the gospel, in the way that Jesus has saved us as well. So what's the purpose of calling out someone like this when they're doing something wrong within your church? Remember, we're talking about Christians with other Christians. Paul says the purpose is to help them get back on the right path. This is not to make them just feel bad or to put them down or make you feel good about yourselves. Ultimately, our desire is that every single person would be walking and acting like Jesus and reflecting his love to each other and to the rest of the world. So this is equivalent to maybe like a surgeon or a therapist, that they go in, they look for the specific problem, and they have to make painful cuts in order to heal that specific area. And in the same way, a therapist is going to take you to those painful places in your past so that you can work through them and get to the other side where there's healing. So the next question we have to think about is, who are we actually responsible to judge? Is it all Christians? Do I have the responsibility of passing judgment on a Christian on the other side of the country, or a pastor in some other state that's preaching things that I don't agree with, or even someone in the church who I just don't know very well, but I know that they're engaging in some activity that I think is wrong? Here's how we know the answer to that question. Look back at verse 2. Paul says, share each other's burdens. The people you are responsible for judging, helping them through these hard issues, calling them to a higher standard, are the people that you are already sharing your burdens with and helping them with their burdens. Now, a burden is kind of a Christian-y sounding word, but essentially it's any hardships that we're going through. If you're thinking about calling another Christian out for something that they are doing wrong, you need to first think through these questions. Do I already have a relationship with this person? Am I actively in their life already, sharing in their struggles and sharing my own struggles with them? And if you answer no to either of those questions, you probably are not the right person to be passing any form of judgment. Now, I said earlier, this would actually be good news for Christians and non-Christians if Christians actually lived this out. Picture going to a church where people loved you and cared for you and helped you through hardships, but they also were going to call you out and call you to a higher standard, actually help you to grow in your faith. That's the kind of church that I would want to be a part of. And for people who aren't Christians, wouldn't you be happy to know that if Christians were engaging in things like racism or sexism, that the Christians in their circles wouldn't stand for it, that they would call those people out and call them to a higher standard and get them to repent of those terrible things that they were believing? I'm honest, that's the type of church that I would want to be a part of, and probably the church that you would want to be a part of too. Well, if this topic has raised any questions for you or you want to discuss them a little bit deeper, we have a group that actually meets on Zoom at Tuesday nights at 7:15 p.m. Central Standard Time. There's a link in the bio for you to sign up. It's free for anyone to join. Feel free to pop in and we'll talk through these. We'll have discussion questions and hopefully we can all kind of push ourselves and push each other in the right direction to actually live more like Jesus.